The content in this podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to diagnose any medical condition, replace the advice of a healthcare professional, or provide any medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Copyright 2020, Fireteam Whiskey, LLC, all rights reserved. Welcome to the Warrior Wellness Podcast, a podcast for military members, veterans, and first responders focusing on fitness, health, nutrition, and biohacking. Our mission with this podcast is to introduce America's heroes to lifestyle habits and hacks that will help them live healthier, happier lives, and in turn, be fit enough to continue their support of their communities and country.
Welcome to the Warrior Wellness Podcast. I'm your host, Captain Stephanie Lincoln. I'm excited to bring you this interview with Dr. Bill Schindler, who is the founder and director of the Eastern Shore Food Lab, an associate professor of Anthropology and Archaeology at Washington College, and he is a TV star. He's the co-star of both the National Geographic series, The Great Human Race, and he is on Curiosity Stream, The Modern Stone Age Family. He's a food archaeologist, a primitive technologist, and a chef. You are going to find out exactly what that all means here in the interview. We hope you enjoy this episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast.
So thank you, Bill, for joining us on the Warrior Wellness Podcast. And I'm just going to start this interview by quoting you, because I do that all the time. So, and this quote from you, I mean, you have so many great sound bites, but this one just mic drop. And I want you to just expound upon that, because this would be a good way to kick off the podcast. So you said, what used to nourish us and build us as a species is now destroying the planet, making us sick, and killing us. And that thing is food. So I'll let you take the reins on that.
Sure. So and you know, that is one of the I'm glad you pulled that one out. It's a powerful one. It's one that guides a lot of what I do and the way I look at food and our relationship with food today as humans and in the past as well. So the way that I like to look at our dietary past, which in my mind, to get a comprehensive look at our dietary past, we have to look at the entirety of 3.5 million years from when our ancestors began to make tools that then allowed us to overcome all of our physical limitations about getting food, and also our really inefficient digestive tracts that, compared to other animals, we have an incredibly difficult time making the food that we eat safe and transforming it into something that our bodies can derive maximum nourishment from. Other animals have all sorts of things like rumens and specialized teeth and gizzards and crops and all sorts of other things that allow them to eat the diets that they're meant to eat. Humans are something different. And what we've done is we have created a relationship with food that is unlike any other animal on the planet. We have created technologies and approaches to food to expand our dietary breadth. In other words, we've been able to access resources that our bodies have no business accessing, and then creating technologies to take these foods and transform them into the safest, most nutrient-dense, nourishing food for our bodies. And what we've done by doing this over millions of years is create a diet that, again, our bodies have no business eating, but that actually at the same time built us as Homo sapiens, built us as what we are today. We began to outgrow our digestive tract 3.5 million years ago, but we built bodies that are so large and have brains that are so big and have such incredible nutrient requirements that we require the foods that we have no business biologically eating. And what that really creates is a really weird conundrum, right? So, what are we supposed to do with that information? How do we take that and understand what our relationship with food is supposed to be? And to get back to that earlier quote, for almost the entirety of 3.5 million years, all of our approaches to food, our relationship with food, the technologies we've created around food have been focused, in my mind, on those three things: creating food that's safe, nutrient-dense, and bioavailable for our bodies, and doing it at the maximum extent possible. And that built us physically, biologically, and culturally as to what we are today. That relationship with food was on such an intense level, direct acquisition of our food, direct hunting and gathering and processing and feeding and sharing that food with one another, that we saw the direct consequences of our actions, right? So if we over-harvested or over-hunted, we could make adjustments the following year. So that means that diet, that relationship was not only the most nourishing diet for us as a species, but it was also the healthiest diet or relationship for the planet around us. But what we've done over the past, well, beginning about 15,000 years ago, but definitely over the past several hundred years, and even more so in the past several decades, is we've inserted links in the food chain. In other words, separated ourselves further and further and further from where our food comes from, how our food is processed, all of those things, to the point where most of us not only don't know where the food comes from or don't know the people that grew it or processed it, but don't even know how food is made. And now the way that we eat our food, the modern food system, I like to say, is a complete failure. We have not only produced obesity in human populations, but we create food now that's so nutrient free, the exact opposite of 3.5 million years, so nutrient free that we can create obesity and malnutrition in the same individual. In other words, you can eat so much that you're obese, but you're still malnourished. And it's a result of that disconnection and relying on other people to tell us how we should be eating.
Yeah, I love that you just, because that was another quote I was going to throw out there from you, was, that you constantly are harping on the fact that our contemporary food system has achieved the impossible. Really, at any time in history, this has never happened up until the recent decades, is that we have obesity and malnutrition in the same individual. And we've come so far from our food process. When we sit down to a meal, we could be having one thing from, that was processed in China, and then the other thing was maybe from Chile. And then, we have so many different things on our plate that are from all these different places, and we have no idea, how it was processed, where it has come from, what pesticides were used, all the processing that's especially in boxed foods, packaged foods. And I want to kind of dive into the packaged foods thing just for a couple of minutes. And when I was doing research on you, I found a couple of things where you had mentioned that you were overweight as a kid.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I'm so I'm sorry that happened. And I was overweight as well. I'm not, but I'd also want to say, I'm so glad that you had that experience, because the one thing in the helping world that we run into as helpers to help people, get healthy and lose weight, is that, people look at me now and go, well, you're a fitness trainer, you're a health coach, you don't know what I'm going through. And I have to kind of go back and say, you know what, I actually do. I was overweight, and I was on 9 different medications at one point in my 20s. And just, there was never any explanation. It was just, well, let's try this treatment. Well, let's try this pill. Nobody, not once, and I'm getting chills just thinking about it. This is why we're so passionate about what we do, is not once did any of those providers who wrote those prescriptions for me mention any kind of dietary change. Not once. And it's so crazy to think that we've come so far away from that, being connected with our food, that we don't realize that food is also medicine.
Yes, it is. When done right. Absolutely.
Yeah. So we need to eat real whole foods, because there's a medicinal part. There's a reason why our species has survived this long, because we use food as medicine as well, and the way that it was used by our ancestors. So you talk about a modern Stone Age diet approach. So I want you to kind of expound upon that. What does that mean?
I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think it's a great way to think about, food in general, but especially for your audience that may be listening to this, that are in many ways with their profession, a lot of times trapped with having to operate or navigate within cafeterias or mess halls or other food, service places where the choice isn't always there that people might be looking for. So if we go back, so the modern Stone Age approach, real quick, one of the things that I'd like to start with is by saying, I don't think the ideal human diet has been created yet. So, and there's several reasons for that. One is, biologically, maybe it has. Biologically, we are the same species as we were 300,000 years ago. We're the same size. Our brain is essentially the same size. Our guts, even though the microflora has changed, but our guts are essentially the same. So nutritional requirements are the same. The way we process food internally is the same. So you could make the argument that the diet that built us as a species 300,000 years ago makes sense biologically for us today. And I believe that. The problem is, and one of the things we have to account for, is that even though biologically we're the same, culturally we're very, very different. We're different now than we were last week. We're different now than we were 5 years ago, and definitely 5,000 years ago. So we have different expectations of taste and texture and presentation, different access to resources. So we're operating within a different cultural space that really impacts how we eat food and how we think about food, right? The reason I say the ideal human diet hasn't been created yet, or even if it has, it can be recreated, is because that cultural target is changing all the time. So we have to figure out a food in order to make the most sense of all the information we have and to move forward in the healthiest way possible, biologically and emotionally, culturally, is to be able to navigate in whatever space that we find ourselves. And it's different potentially for many of us. So in the past, I'm convinced, whether it was conscious or subconsciously or both, our hunter-gatherer ancestors, no matter what environment they found themselves in, figured out the best approach and technology to transform whatever resources they had into the safest, most nutrient-dense, bioavailable food for their bodies. And that's how we left Africa 2 million years ago and populated all different latitudes and longitudes. Now, today, we're not talking about a hunter-gatherer on top of a mountain in, Ice Age Europe or on the African savanna, a couple million years earlier. We're talking about trying to navigate modern foodscapes, grocery stores, dining halls, restaurants, our own kitchen, and trying to figure out how to do that in not only the best possible way for us biologically, but also emotionally and culturally. We have so much guilt surrounding food anymore that we have to navigate that. So when I say a modern Stone Age diet, it doesn't necessarily mean we're all outside hunting with bows and arrows and foraging for all our food, although there is something to that. What I mean is that we approach our modern foodscapes, whatever they are, in the same way that our hunter-gatherer ancestors did. In other words, when you walk into whatever that place is, your cafeteria, restaurant, first of all, you realize that that's where you have to eat. So, all the guilt's gone. You just need to make a choice depending on what's in front of you. And if you know how food is made and you know how, if you're in tune with your body, you can navigate that potential foodscape with this in mind. What are my choices, given what's in front of me, to take this food and put it into my body in the safest, most nutrient-dense, nourishing way possible? And I know that may not sound like a big deal, but it is, and in other words, what you have to do to navigate that foodscape is, again, be in touch with your own body, your own senses. But one of the best things that we can do is start cooking at home again. And, for many of us, I'm very lucky because I have a very flexible work schedule at the college, and I cook everything that we have at home. We do our own butchering, we do all our own cheese making, we do all of it here. And I know not everybody has that opportunity, but you can find time to make those things at least once. And even just basic bread making, basic cheese making, basic butter making, learning how to butcher a chicken on your counter, those things are so incredibly powerful, because even if you never do them again, and even if you completely screw it up and create something that's inedible, you have educated yourself. You're now an informed consumer that you can pull back the veil of all the marketing and all the advertising, and you can start to listen to yourself again about how you should eat and what food choices you should make.
Yeah, I love that. And also I watched one of your shows on cooking, and you were talking about potato, I think French fries was one of the episodes. And you had a whole bunch of French fries around you, and there were bags of French fries, and you picked up one of the bags, and, you read off the ingredients, and you're like, French fries are potatoes. Like, what is all this stuff? I mean, there was just things you can't pronounce. And I love that approach of just kind of maybe using your common sense and stepping back and going, did our ancestors eat, high fructose corn syrup or canola oil, or, red dye number 4, whatever it is. And when you're looking at your food and go, you know what, this probably isn't the most bioavailable, nutrient dense thing I could eat right now. Is there something maybe within its proximity that I can choose that maybe is closer to that? And we do get that complaint a lot with the veterans, military members, and first responders that we work with is, first responders, they never know when their next meal is, right? It's just, maybe they've got call after call after call. The law enforcement personnel, they spend almost all their time in their car. They don't have time to take these, long lunch breaks. And then military members, it's whatever, it's available in the chow hall, or you're handed an MRE, you're out in the field, right? So, but the modern way we live right now means that we have to make a mindful attempt to do the best we can in the situations that we're in, and even just planning out a little bit. I worked with a guy who was out in the field for 2 weeks, and all they get is these MREs. And of course, it's all processed food. It's very carbohydrate. It's just a ton of just chemicals. And, these things are shelf stable for 10 years. Of course, they're packed with chemicals, right? So we had him pack, apples, things that can take a lot of wear and tear and just kind of last a long time. And, kind of beef jerky and nuts and, things that he could take with him. And he said that really saved him. He actually lost weight when he was out in the field. And he said, usually I'd gain weight because I'm just eating all this crap and M&Ms and all the stuff that comes in these MREs. So he felt so good about that. Even just, yes, he was still kind of eating some of that processed food, but he made a mindful attempt to include some of those very bioavailable foods.
Well,
so I love
think
that you touched that.
Really important things there. One is that we need to get rid of this guilt. I was heavy as a kid. I had an incredibly poor, what's the word I'm looking for? Unhealthy relationship with food, right? It was, to me, food wasn't something that nourished me. It was something that made me fat, made me ugly, made other people make fun of me and actually beat me up. And I have a completely opposite view of it now, but I still have all these really unfortunate, strong feelings from when I was young. But even now we have this guilt that, we carry around because we have these, in some cases, unrealistic expectations for how we should eat, or we have the wrong expectations. So the first thing is, I think, again, it should be situation specific. If you're out in the field and all you have is X, Y, and Z in front of you, then that is your foodscape. It's you shouldn't even be considering that you should be eating something else when it's not an option, and not have guilt about having to eat what's actually in front of you if that's your only options. So it should be guilt-free. The second thing, which is, I think, really, really important for when we do have more choices, in situations where we have more choices about how we should be eating, we have this, and I don't know where it's come from, but anybody who, not anybody, most people who are trying to get healthy think that there has to be some sort of pain or discomfort or hunger that goes along with eating healthy, right? If you're eating, if you leave a meal and feel good, then something's wrong. Well, no, it's the exact opposite. Every single meal, and I want everybody to listen to this, please. Every single meal that we eat should be satiating, should be gratifying. We should derive pleasure from it. It should be nourishing. We should get up from the table and not be hungry, and also not have to open up another belt on our belt loop. We should be content, because all those feelings that we have surrounding food, and food is such, obviously, eating is a cultural experience, but it's also, all tons of biological responses, right, that signals when we're eating. They're there because they're hardwired in us to tell us we should eat this and not eat this, eat more of this, eat less of this. That's what they're there for. So it doesn't make evolutionary sense that the meal that we should eat to be the healthiest is in conflict with the feelings we have surrounding food. Now, that only works if we're in tune with our bodies and we're faced with nourishing food. But in that situation, you should feel incredible every single meal. But we've normalized feeling, like we need more. We actually celebrate it. If we think we should be losing weight, we're not doing our job unless we're hungry. And that's not the case. We can lose weight and be satiated at the same time. We can live our best life and feel gratified at every single meal. But the key is you need to be in front of nourishing food, and you need to be able to really understand your signals.
I love that you touched upon that. Thank you for saying that. And I say this all the time since I made this journey about 3 years ago. And I switched to ketogenic, and then I kind of switch in and out of carnivore at times. And I say all the time, I can't believe I can sit down and eat all of this food, because I come from the diet mentality, right? From struggling with my weight all my life. And now it is easy, and I don't have that guilt associated with eating and measuring everything and obsessing and counting every calorie. That freed me from all of that. And it really was just me switching to eating whole foods, real foods, and also just paying attention. And I love that you said that, because you go out and you go into these cultures, in Africa and all over the world, where, you're sitting down at these tables or on the floor, or whatever they do in that culture. And it's an experience, right? Nobody's like sitting in front of a laptop and then they got their phone and somebody's talking to them. They're on a video call and they're just shoveling anything in their mouth. That's our modern society, and that's what we do. And I think that connection back to food is also just paying attention, sitting down in front of your plate, not having distractions, and paying attention to the signals that your body is sending you when you are eating certain things. And once I started doing that, I really realized the things my body personally, because we're all bio-individual, right, doesn't like, and was maybe sending me those signals for years and years and years, but I just never took the time to listen. Right. So I know, like, when I sit down and I have like a bunch of processed carbs, on occasion, I'll have just a crazy, stupid meal, and I feel like crap afterwards. I mean, I'm all bloated and just tired and lethargic and just, and I just feel like kind of headachy. And if you're taking the time to just pause and feel what that food makes you feel, maybe you will also make better choices next time for ourselves.
See, I haven't counted a calorie in at least over 5 years. I haven't stepped on the scale in probably 3 years, and I have never felt better. I was a Division I wrestler for Ohio State. I'm in better shape now than I was in the 1990s, and I'm 47 years old now. But I think, one of the things we like to, as modern scientific focused people, we feel empowered when we have, an app that tells us how many calories are in this, and a calculator tells us this, and follow whatever diet plans that tell us we should be counting these carbs and all the. We haven't even known what a calorie has been. We started measuring calories about 120 something years ago, and then, figured out how to measure and quantify carbohydrates and fats and vitamins only in the past 125 years. And we've never been sicker as a species. We've never had to do it before. And for as empowered as you feel when you're documenting how many remember this, that none of us, it's actually, to me, one of the most unempowering things, because I don't care who you are, you really don't know all the ins and the outs of exactly what it means that there'll be this kind of fat and this kind of carbohydrate and this kind of vitamin. We're not scientists. We're just humans trying to feed ourselves. So that means in order to do that, you're relying on somebody else to measure that information from their food, then take that information and interpret it to us. And there's a lot of power there. People that are doing that can control how we think about food and how we feed ourselves and what we buy. There's a lot of money, there's a lot of bias, there's a lot of big food manufacturing going into all of that. And that's how we get controlled how to eat. There's nobody else has control about how we feel other than us. And you know what? For 300,000 years, we've done an incredibly good job at feeding ourselves. For 3.5 million years, we've done such a good job that our bodies and our brains got bigger and more nourished over time. And now we're at a place where we give all that information or all that power up to somebody else, and that's how the food system is controlled. Now, I am not saying that we shouldn't keep track of what we're eating. That's not what I'm suggesting. And if it's a kind of thing that really gets you excited about, how you plan that's fine. But what I'm suggesting is that everything that we need to feed ourselves, or everything that we need to make food choices, is instinctual, right? We have it in us. Again, we have to be faced with real food, and we have to be in tune with our bodies. But one of the things that I've recently started to talk about is that most of the food conversations focus on what we eat. The doctors, the nutritionists, the dietitians, the USDA, everybody's telling us, eat this, don't eat this, eat more of this, eat less of this. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, I think that's the wrong question. What should we be eating? Those are things that we instinctually are hardwired to decide for ourselves. But all other animals have that instinct as well, and they do a great job in the wild with that. The question we should be asking, that not enough people are paying attention to, and this is where most of my work is focused on right now, is how we should be eating. In other words, we know that biologically we have these nutritional needs that we can't meet with what we have biologically. Our digestive tracts aren't suited to do it on its own. So what we do as humans, and we've been doing for millions of years, is using technology to transform raw materials into something that our bodies can most safely and efficiently do the best work with. That's the thing. That's what we should be asking. How do you do this? How did we do this in the past? And that's the information that tribal elders and grandparents and parents and colleagues would pass on to one another over time from generation to generation. That's what we need to be asking other people how to do. What exactly we should be eating, we should be able to do that on our own. How we transform an animal into the most nourishing food for our bodies, how we transform dairy, how we transform grains if you're eating grains, how we do those things, those are the most important questions. And if you can understand that, then you can navigate all of those different modern foodscapes to the best of your ability.
Yeah, great. And so I just wanted to, we're getting towards the end of the time here. Of course, I could talk to you for hours about this subject because there's so many tangents we can go on, but I'm trying to stay focused. Sure. So I want to get from you, the expert, maybe 3 things that the average Joe Schmo out there, the law enforcement officer, the firefighter, the military guy, could apply in their life right now that will get them, many steps closer to the modern Stone Age diet approach that you're talking about. Just practical, maybe 3 practical things that they could do right now.
Okay, so the first one are directly food related, and the third would be sort of more just about thought process and connection. So the very first thing I would say is to immediately get rid of all nut and seed oils completely out of your kitchen and out of your diets in general. And if you do that, you're accomplishing so many different things. Now, when I say nut and seed oils, I mean all the vegetable oils except for potentially avocado and olive oil, which are actually fruit oils, or not nut and seed oils. Coconut oil I absolutely love. And there's more and more research coming out about macadamia nut oil that's potentially fine. They have higher omega-3 counts, and they all give up their fat more easily without extensive processing and heat and chemicals and things. But all of those are for cold applications only. I don't cook with any of them. All the cooking in our house, any heating relies upon high quality animal fats: butter, ghee, lard, tallow, goose fat, chicken fat, smolts, whatever. Mm-hmm. And those are what we cook with, and across the board. And we eat massive amounts of fat, but we do it within that context. The other side note, the other thing that comes with that is if you're actually reading the back of the labels of your packages and you're keeping all nut and seed oils out of your diet, then you've already eliminated most of the processed food, which is a great second piece. So number 1 is to get rid of all nut and seed oils and focus only on high quality animal fats, especially when cooking. The second thing, and I hope this comes out the right way, is I really want to make sure I say this the right way. I've only started talking about this recently, and I haven't figured out the exact wording around it. understand when I say this, we eat plants in our house, and we eat plants almost daily. But one of the quotes that I've been recently putting out there is that animals can hurt you or kill you when they're alive, and plants can hurt you or kill you long after they're dead.
Yes, that was the third quote I was going to throw out there.
Well, the reason that I say that is because, and I'll do the quick version because I know we're running out of time, but animals, all the technologies we've created surrounding animals as food source in the past are focused on overcoming their physical defense mechanisms. So their speed, their strength, ability to fly, their teeth, their horns, antlers, claws, whatever, and allow us to hunt or trap them or catch them from a distance. And once we've killed them and we have a sharp edge that we can cut into them, in front of us is the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable, safest food possible for humans. I mean, in fact, animals, especially fat, literally, in my mind, built us as a species. That's great. Plants are something completely different. Plants do contain nutrition, and some of it is incredibly valuable nutrition. But the two problems with plants are that, number one, they don't move. So almost all of their defense mechanisms are from a chemical perspective, the toxins that they create. And all plants, every single plant at some level, create toxins. And the second thing is that even though these plants have incredible nutrition, they don't give it up as easily as the animal food sources do. So in both cases, it requires eating vegetables in the safest, most nourishing way possible require different approaches and technologies, food processing technologies, to make them safe and to have them give up the nutrients they contain. Just because, remember, we have these incredibly inefficient digestive tracts. Just because we eat something doesn't mean that the nutrition it contains gets to where it needs to be in our bodies. If we, you'd be surprised at how much of our nutrition we pass directly through our system on a daily basis. So things like, we need to first be aware that plants have toxins. Some of them are not a big deal for us. Some of them will kill us outright. Many of them will build up over time in our bodies, but they all have toxins. So ways of getting around those toxins are things like eating seasonally, right? We've taken all the seasons out of the grocery store, but eating seasonally helps limit the overconsumption of certain toxins. Processing strategies like fermentation are absolutely incredible. It detoxifies certain plants, it pre-digests certain plants, and is a wonderful way. Home vegetable fermentation is probably one of the easiest, most empowering ways to start to process food in a new way that has ancient roots, but has a powerful implication on our diets. So be aware of vegetables and consume them the right way in your diet. And again, fermentation and eating seasonally are two of the big ones. And the third thing, which bear with me, it's going to sound crazy, but I wholeheartedly believe in it, is become a hunter-gatherer in the real sense of a hunter-gatherer, even if it's only once or twice a year. And what I mean is, forage at least once. And I don't care if you're picking blackberries on the side of the road or dandelions out of your yard, or go fish, or go hunt, or collect clams, whatever it is. We have, for the majority of the time, the vast majority of the time that we have been on this planet, we have directly acquired our food from our environment. There is something ancestral about it. There's something connected about it. There's something empowering about it. And it reminds us where our food comes from, the value of our human environmental relationship, all of those things. It's just amazing. And it doesn't matter where you are, you can do these things. Hunting may be difficult in some cases, but foraging isn't. In fact, my favorite foraging tour that I teach every year is in the middle of Washington, D.C. Every May I teach a foraging class at the Hill Center. We actually forage all the way up to the Capitol and at the Capitol, and then come back, and then we cook for a couple hours. It doesn't matter where you are. And the cool thing about foraging is, my wife doesn't like this part, but I visually forage from the road when I'm driving. So, you can even be sitting in your car, parked underneath a bridge in the middle of a city, and see something edible popping through the concrete that you can identify, think about, maybe even go and harvest. So again, it doesn't have to be every single day or even make up a significant portion of your diet, but going back to these ancestral roots and connecting with your food and your environment in such a powerful way is, I think, can go really far in our connection with our food and reconnecting with our health.
Oh, I love that. Those are fantastic tips that anybody can do right now, even if it's just, going out or taking some of your virtual cooking classes. So
Absolutely.
I saw those. I'm definitely signing up. I'm so interested, especially the nose to tail one. Dr. Bill has these virtual cooking classes on making sourdough bread, fermented dairy, and nose to tail. So you don't even have to live where he lives. You can actually work with Dr. Bill and learn these techniques that you can do just, anywhere USA, and get more connected with your food and get a lot more bioavailable food in your lives. So I'm going to put all of that stuff in the show notes, but thank you so much, Dr. Bill, for joining us on the Warrior Wellness podcast. I learned so much, and I hope our audience did too. And just check out the show notes so you can find out more about all of the things. Even just getting on his newsletter is just fantastic. Just get on the newsletter. I learn something every single time I get it. So thank you so much.
Truly my pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Warrior Wellness Podcast. Go ahead and check us out on iTunes or Spotify, and make sure to subscribe to our podcast, and go ahead and leave us a review. And if you leave us a review and take a screenshot of your review, send it to the email info@fireteamwhiskey.com. We will send you some Fire Team Whiskey swag as a thank you for taking the time to review the podcast.